I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. Because this is Airwindows Trianglizer. Now, what you may ask is Trianglizer? Well, last week I put out a plugin called Overheads, and I discovered at the last minute that running a sine wave into that at exactly the right volume weirdly was successful at turning that into a sine wave. And so I went, hey, that's neat. And people went, oh, that's the thing you were talking about that made sine waves into triangles? And I went, oh, no. Because that one was not a waveshaper. That was a weird side effect of an existing plugin. And I figured I might as well just bring this out. You'll forgive me if I'm a little bit scattered, which I am, because I've been working like crazy on some things like more reverb work, and that metering stuff has me getting together a collection of songs tracked off of records and checking them with the meter madly, and hopefully starting to put out videos where you can see what certain songs actually sound like and how they measure. And it's got me completely scattered. So I'm going to do my best to get through the video today. And I'm going to give you a Trianglizer, which hopefully, unless I screw the release of that up, will be giving you that. And you'll see what it does. For starters, here's what it does. We can have this set to dry. Trianglizer is actually making stuff quieter. And you might not consider that to be useful, but it has its uses. The reason for that is because in order to change a sine wave into a triangle, the very top of the wave where it curves over has to point quite sharply. And then the place where it's passing through the center actually has to flatten out. So bits of it are being made significantly quieter. And the part where it's crossing through zero is also being cut back a little bit. So this could conceivably work as a kind of reverb ambience cleanupper because it's applying across the board. You can hear what it's doing here. Fullness. And it gets a little bit drier as you do that. Now, I do have another setting on this, and this is called Fat, and that does kind of like the opposite a little bit. It's not as big of an effect, but it's bringing lows out in an interesting and characteristic way. So we seem to be able to apply it in multiple ways and blend between them while consistently applying this particular sound, because it's not just the same. Even in the middle, it's doing some interesting things in there. Now, the reason I'm calling it Trianglizer is because it does a triangulization on sine waves at exactly the right level. Exactly the right is defined as exactly up to clipping. So what we can do is jump over here, and I've got a sine wave here that I set up in advance. In fact, this is my sine base thingy. And it's here so that I can apply Trianglizer to it, which will do this once I turn bypass off, because that caught me, I think, last time. I tried to do an entire video and went and switched over to this, discovered it was on bypass, and decided that I had it bypassed the entire time, which I'm no longer sure is true. Like I said, I'm real scattered, but I'm going to try to get through all of this with you. Let's hear what it does now. We hear it making an obvious effect And then if we apply it, we will see in this window that we have made triangles. Although you'll notice they're not perfect triangles, they're a little bit exaggerated from what a perfect triangle would be. This is the output of this algorithm. It's not the magic triangle maker algorithm. It's just a mathematical algorithm, and it is changing perfect science to a slightly exaggerated triangle, where the zero cross is a little flatter than it has to be, and the point is a little sharper than it has to be. But wait, there's more. Because we can go back to our, I only just updated the colors of this so you can see it more clearly. We can go back to this and do things like, for instance, fade it in. And now we've got sine waves, and it's just a wave shaper, so it doesn't really matter what frequency is. And we can apply our trianglizer to this. And remember, we've got a triangle fat control. I'll show you that in a moment. But set to full wet at the trianglizer, we will now get something else. And you might ask, what did we create through doing this? We've got kind of a rounded topped triangle going on here. It's not a perfect transition, but it's taking the flattest areas and kind of making them be flatter to where it's taking on the form that we want at lower levels. These rounded topped triangles are still flatter across the middle than the sine wave would be. And that's how it does its sound thing and sort of cleans and dries up sounds by, even if they're not at full crank. And we'll scan ahead a little bit and see what it's doing as the sound gets louder and louder. And we'll fuss with the wave shape a little bit so that it can fit on the screen better. And we'll see that as we keep pushing it in this direction, the triangle that we're making becomes more sharply pointed right up to where it is as sharply pointed as I can make it. And then you pull back, and the rest of the shape seems more or less unchanged. It's going, I think, a little bit flatter. It's not quite as steep edged, but the change is very much about rounding off the point of this triangle more and more as it goes. And it's just naturally doing that on a sine wave input, because this is a, wave generated sine wave the whole way around. It's just going to do this to your sound effects. And that's how it produces. It does not care what frequency it's at. It doesn't care whether it's noise, whether it's cymbals, who knows what. It's just going to do the wave shaping. And the wave shaping that it's making is giving you a smooth blend from a really round topped triangle wave to a sharp pointed triangle wave. And the sharp point is retained only at the loudest of sounds. So what we're going to do is undo out of that again. And here we are at our sine wave again. And we've still got our fade. And now let's go through one last time and do our trianglize effect. I'm finding it in recent effects, this one. But instead we're going to set it to full fat rather than tri. It's the opposite effect. And still at full wet. We apply that, and we have something that looks almost like it's making stuff be slightly louder, but we still have a pretty soft sine-like section, it's a little bit triangle-y, but not really very. And then as we get louder, we start to see what the wave shaping is doing at full crank with this variation on the theme. And it's not going to try to do a point. Instead, it's trying to do a kind of flat top while still taking the stuff in the middle and trying to make that straighten out. You can plainly see it, what this variation on the algorithm is doing. I just kind of arrived at this by accident. I just stumbled across it when I was working on the revision to console 6, and the variation that's actually going to be the one that's going into console X, which is console 9, and that's going to be coming out soon too. But this doesn't end up being part of any console algorithm because it's not actually, it's like it's doing a thing where you could conceivably make it point the top of the triangle and then put it back, but it doesn't really work that way. It's just another weird wave shaping. And this one is making the tip of our triangle waves like a soft clip, flatter and a little bit louder, but it's not making the center of the sound louder. In fact, it's slanting the center. I can pretty plainly see it. It just tries to go a little bit flatter going through the center. What that means is that it's not going to be bringing up lower level signals. It's just making the louder signals a little bit bulkier as they go. And this is an effect that could find a place in a number of things. For one, you could probably use it to get a kind of 60s loudness sound. Some of the studies that I've been doing as far as using this metering and showing what classic albums from classic records really truly sound like, I've been doing a bunch of recordings of Kinks albums and have found that there's an awful lot of distorting the inputs on the Kinks recordings, sometimes really quite strikingly so. And it produces a 60s sound that's really rowdy and abrasive, strangely dry, not a lot of reverb on the whole. And everything just kind of has an extra slam because it's kind of intensely saturated. That's that sound. This would be a way of doing that without just bringing up all the background sounds as well, increasing a certain amount of punch, as you can see from the flat topping of the waves, without automatically bringing up all the quieter sounds as well. And as you back off a little bit, we can still see a little bit of that effect in the middle there. It's a little bit of it there. But we're taking a quieter sine and turning it into basically a louder sine that has a slight triangulization to it. And then we can continue to back out, and we start to get an even softer sine-like shape, and we stop getting that slight artifact of the quiet bits. It's like with much quieter stuff, it's allowing the quiet parts to not be like faintly gated, and then as it gets much louder, it starts to go into this zone where, like we can see, there's a tiny discontinuity as it goes through there, and normally it would be tilting the opposite way going through the center, meaning that the quietest bits of ambience and space around the sound of the track would end up a little louder, and this is drying them up a bit. And that is Trianglizer. And I can skip back over to the rock track that I have here and show you what I'm talking about, because like I said, at a full triangle effect, we make it pretty uniformly quieter, but with the peaks coming out. Whereas if we go to full fat, it's not actually bringing out space inside the mix like simply distorting would. Instead, you get this. Louder, but without being fuller. The solidity of things is poking through a little bit more, but it's not bringing up ambience as much as it otherwise would. And we might even be able to play with this. I haven't tried this before, so bear with me. We're going to find out what happens. We can do a thing called an effect stack in Twisted Wave. And we'll sort of overlap the window that we're working in. And we're going to just add a stack of these. That is at full wet and full fat. There's also a global bypass. And then there's another. And then there's another. So we can switch from bypass to 3 of them in a row and hear what that does to this sound, which is going to be this. Engage. And we can turn them on one at a time. Like, we hear a sort of interesting flutteriness going on in here because we're doing this non-linearity. And here's 3. And then let's also make it be incredibly quiet by setting all of them to full triangulization. And here we engage none of them, and now 3 of them. Trianglizer. It is exaggerating the peaks at the cost of the body of the sound with extreme prejudice this way. You could probably put gain in there, and all it would do is just poke out the spikes even more. And then let's go one final time and adjust each of these on the fly and see what we can make happen. All of them at full fat. And then we're going to pull the dry wet back a little bit and see what we get. This isn't the side I wanted to see. My baby, you got to rise for me. Take a little bit more, just enough to make it obvious. Baby, you got to rise for me. This isn't the side I wanted to see. My baby, you got to. So now we've got a kind of beefyizer, seeing as we've layered this a couple of times while applying the same thing. We're making it more obvious rather than just applying it once to get the effect. I want the effect to be gratuitously obvious. So, no effect. Then, much drier compared to bypass. This amounts to downright spiteful. Who's the fool that is a pretty decent 60ization. Let's put the final one more extreme and the initial one less extreme. Last one in the middle. And then we'll exaggerate it a little bit more. And let's take that initial one. And we're going to pull it back to triangulization a little bit. And now we've got a loudinated version that doesn't bring up ambience. Here's what it's like with just everything bypassed. We've got a little reverb and stuff in there, but then when we kick all of these on, and then let's take this one out. So that's interesting. There you have it. It's taking me more time to make these videos lately. Like I think a fellow said, I think it might have been Lewis Carroll, in fact, I am sorry for the length of this letter. I did not have enough time to make it shorter. So I'm sorry for the length of this video. I didn't have time to make it shorter. But I did have time to give you Trianglizer and do my level best to explain what it's doing, because that is always part of the problem with stuff like this, where I'm trying to invent new things and work out what that means to you as the producer, mixer, engineer, etc., who's trying to make this stuff do something interesting, and you don't necessarily have a good head start on what does this mean to me. Well, that's my level best at explaining it. Trianglizer is a waveshaper. It's capable of taking sine waves and turning them into pointy triangles. And it's capable of taking a lot of stuff and turning it into sort of more high peak energy, but also sucking out some of the really low-level stuff with that flattening behavior. And the end result is you can use it to give this sort of low-budget 1960s, densely packed, lo-fi quality thing. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean only 60s. I suppose it's possible that, some early 90s sampling might have similar characteristics. It's really a question of, does this give a sound that interests you after you've figured out what that sound actually means? And like I demonstrated, stacking them up could be a way of showing or researching into what does this mean on my sounds? What is this doing with my noises? And is it doing it in a way that I would at all like? Or is it doing something that I'm less interested in having done? That's basically where that stands. I will get back to work. I have more firewood to put in my fire because up here in Vermont, we're getting snow again. In fact, I'm going to need to go out and shovel. And I've also got a bunch of more vinyl records to copy onto my computer. I've been moving the record player around and trying to get it into a place where it's interfered with less by my fiber optic modem, because I noticed that peeking through into the records and I did not like it. So I had to find a new place for it. And I'm really excited about showing what some of these classic records really sound like. I got to pick stuff where people can do reacts, but my reacts are going to be silent. You'll just be watching the screen and seeing this meter, the meter that I'm trying to develop, with its little line saying how loud various things are, where the peak energy sits, where the RMS energy sits. Normally you get to see the RMS energy, but you don't get to see peak distributed across a display. And with mine you do. But we've also got a zero crossing meter, and that's new. That's revealing a lot of interesting stuff, and I really look forward to showing it. And for the stuff that we can actually hear on a stream, because it's okay for people to do React videos, you'll hear my take on what this stuff is supposed to sound like before even CDs, much less remixes. And it's a pretty big deal. Sometimes I'll be able to A/B between that and the modern remix version, but I might not even bother with that. I might just show the way it's supposed to sound. And it should be pretty revealing. It should be pretty ear-opening. And then you'll see the meter going throughout the entire track, so you can see exactly where certain things show up peak-wise and RMS-wise. And then you will also be able to see me making a running commentary with my little white text stuff that I put on the top of the screen. Hopefully that'll be enough educational purposes that it will clearly be a transformational work. But, close your eyes and you're just listening to a wonderful song. Because sometimes people get to do that. One more thing. I could also develop a plugin akin to the one that I used to do back when my plugins were all $50 or $60 each. Kind of like if I was releasing Triangulate and you just have to go to Kagi Shareware and buy it. And because I used to do that and it made more money than this, I'll tell you. But back in that day, I wasn't making this stuff available to some of the people who maybe need it most. And I wasn't making stuff available perhaps to some of the people who are going to make really interesting, cool music using it. So I'm much happier with the way this is working out. But yeah, I have had to move the record player. I'm making these recordings. I'm studying them like mad and still working on different versions of console and all that kind of stuff. And it's very interesting times. But for now, I got to go and shovel my driveway and then do all these other things as well. So I'll talk to you later. I hope you like Triangulate. Bye-bye.